In conversation with Calvin Klehr. Calvin lives with his husband Warren in their humble apartment, affectionate named Sabrina, in Australia's own Emirate city, Sydney. His tall tales explore unrequited love in the theatre district of the afterlife, romance between a dreamer and a realist, a man escaping an abusive relationship on board an enchanted ocean liner, and a dystopian city addicted to social media. His one fantasy novel, The Midnight Man, scored first place in the LGBT category of the Paranormal Romance Guild Reviewers' Choice Award and won in the fantasy category of the 2021 Gay Scribe Award. It was also runner-up in the Rainbow Award, while Winter Masquerade received an honorable mention. His first novel, Drama Queens with Love Saints, spawned a secondary character named Guy. Many readers argue that Guy, the insecure gay angel, is a star of the Actors and Angels book series. In fact, Calvin had to suddenly include him in the sequel. So, with his fictional guardian angel guiding him, Calvin hopes to bring more whimsical tale of love, life, and friendship to his readers. And on today's episode of Auto Interview, it's my utmost pleasure, joy, and excitement to have on the show today Calvin Clear. How are you doing today, Calvin? Good morning from England.
Good evening from Sydney, Australia. Had a great day. Me and my husband went and saw a play today,
Oh,
while a friend who showed up a couple of days ago is still here, but they've gone down to the pub down the street to give me the place to
oh.
myself so I can actually do this interview.
Yeah, that's quite amazing to know, really. And it's quite lovely. We're in different time zones. Time travel, I always say. Lovely to have you on
Yeah,
the show today. Thank you for coming on.
I hope there's enough light here because it is evening and it's late autumn, so
Oh,
so
yeah.
it's getting darker earlier.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. So, Calvin, I need to first say that I was taken aback by the description page of your book, Drama Queens with Love Saints, which is a first book in the Actors and Angels series on Amazon. And I would like to start this conversation by asking what inspired the making of it. If you could tell us about the foundation, the making, the inspiration behind it, and how you get started with writing the series and this particular book being the first series, that would be great.
Yeah, I used to love writing when I was a kid. It was my favorite hobby. I used to love writing stories. I used to make up staple together little fake books and write them. And over the years, like in my 20s, I went off and studied acting. In my 30s, I studied film and television production. And when I got to my 40s, just by the way, I'm 60 now.
Oh,
When I was in
wow.
my thank you, thank you. When I was in my 40s, I just thought, what's a hobby that I want to continue in my retired years? And if I want to do that, I should start it now so I build upon it, my knowledge of it and my expertise on it.
Yeah.
So I went back to writing. Now, originally, Drama Queens with Love Scenes was called, the working title was Staging Life. And I just wanted to explore my interest in reincarnation and my thoughts about reincarnation by
Mm,
having two characters dead. They're two characters based on me and my husband. And they could look back on their lives. Actually, this is, now that I've said that, I've realized it's the theme of lots of my books. They could look back on their lives in the theatre district of the afterlife.
mm,
Now, after I had the first draft written, I gave it to an assessor who basically said, there's a lot of work that still needs to be done on this.
wow.
And she said, because there's a little bit of romance right at the end between these two characters that are based on me
Yeah.
and my husband, and there's also a little bit of theatre in it. Expand those two elements.
Mm,
Write what you know. You know about love,
mm.
you know about theatre. And she also said, and change that bloody title. Staging Life is a horrible title. So I wrote all these variations and came up eventually with Drama Queens with Love Scenes.
Mm.
Um, and so I then had to cause a rift between me and my boyfriend at the time, my husband, my lifelong partner.
Yeah.
So I introduced a third character he could run off with, so it could become a bit of a love triangle. And
Mm.
as you read in the introduction, the angel character Guy was the most popular character in it, an insecure angel. That when I was writing the second book, I didn't include him in. Now, just to just give you an idea, after I finished writing Drama Queens with Love Scenes, I
Yeah.
did, submit it to many, 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 many places.
Wow.
And eventually a publisher called Cambridge Press, not
Yeah.
Cambridge Press, Charles River Press, they
Mm.
published it. And this is the first edition of the book that came out in
Oh,
2012.
oh
But
wow.
the interesting thing about them now um, is that they gave me a contract on the strength of the first chapter. So a year later, when it came around to actually working on it with them and such, I got this
Mm.
nasty email from the editor in chief of that publishing house
Yeah.
saying, um, uh, "You call this an erotic novel? If there's no sex in this novel, it'll never see the light of day." I'm thinking, what? It's a fantasy about two friends who are in the theatre district of the afterlife. Where did
Yeah.
you get the idea this was erotica?
So
The thing is, because it was my first publishing deal, and the editor, who was a great editor, she
yeah.
made me reshape that novel brilliantly
Oh
and taught
wow.
me the importance of show, don't tell, and taught me
Mm.
the importance that every chapter has to end with a cliffhanger because the
Yeah.
what I submitted to them every chapter rounded up nicely as a story. And she said, "You do that. It's
Mm.
easy to put down on the coffee table. It'll take them ages before they want to pick it up again. You have to keep keep cliffhangers going."
Yeah.
Anyway, and she taught me a lot, and we restructured that whole novel over 3 months. But
Mm.
I pushed back on the sex scenes because like it doesn't need sex scenes. There's no reason for sex scenes in this book. And I pushed back once, but as it was my first publishing deal, it's like, don't be a difficult author. So I had to even invent an extra character for the
Mm.
main character to have sex with. And
Mm.
to this day, I still don't like those three little sex scenes being in them
Oh wow.
because of course, I didn't know how to write sex scenes, and I don't like a fantasy that has elements that don't have anything to do with the
Mm.
story.
Yeah.
But to this day, it has sex scenes. Now, when I because it was a year before they published this from the contract, I decided that the now in Drama Queens with Love Scenes, there are a few plays that are performed in the afterlife with the main characters, and there's one play they perform where a couple of warlocks and witches do this magical spell on a gay couple and a
Mm.
single man, giving them the let's say the spell of temptation, right?
Yeah.
And I thought, well, that's an interesting thing to do as a sequel,
Mm.
while the first book has already been contracted,
Yeah.
but we haven't started working on it yet. So, in Drama Queens and Adult Themes,
Yeah.
these editions are through Nine Star Press, a
Mm.
small publishing house in the
Mm.
US. I thought that would be great. So it contains the Warlocks and the couple in their 40s
Yeah.
and someone they meet, and then a couple of Warlocks and a witch going, "Oh, let's make this interesting. Let's put a magical spell on these three and make them all attracted to each other and just see how they deal with fidelity and and again, it's not a sexy book,
Yeah.
but the idea of exploring temptation and those questions about monogamy is what I wanted to explore. But of
Mm.
course, I didn't put Guy the Angel in it. And when this book finally came out in its original form, all the
Mm.
reviewers loved Guy the Insecure Angel, so I had to quickly put him in to the sequel. The
Yeah.
last in the series, because you asked me about the series,
Yeah.
Drama Queens and Devilish Schemes. I had to come up with a reason that me and Warren would probably break up. It's totally fictional because most
Mm.
of my books have got a base slightly on fact or elements of fact because I
Wow.
call writing my therapy.
Mm.
Um,
Wow.
um, but I had to come up with something that would actually most likely
Yeah,
rip us apart. And then I had
absolutely.
to really work on how do we go from that to coming back together.
Yeah.
So that's how the three were written.
Wow, that's a lovely one, really. That's a beautiful. I love your deep, lovely explanation. Even while you were talking, I had to take some notes here. I'm gonna go back to
Yeah,
later. I love your deep
yeah.
explanation into the making of drama queens with love scenes, which is quite amazing, really. And also, Kelvin, after the first book in the Actor and Angel series, what led you to continue the story into the second and third book? And what themes were you most excited for readers to take away from the rest of the series? What themes were you most excited to explore, to show forth while you're writing a novel? Because I know that there are some subject lines, there's some message as well as telling a story that some authors tends to pass in a book. A message, a central theme, a central subject, a central, conversation mode. What is this all about, really? If you'd like to lay some more emphasis on it.
You're sure. I'll be honest here because when I was writing Drama Queens with Love Scenes, and by the way, as you can see, it's been published by several different publishers.
Yeah.
This was the second edition by another publishing house
Wow.
because because while I was at a big writers festival in New Orleans
Yeah.
promoting promoting Drama Queens with Love
Oh
Scenes,
wow. That's
they
the other
they
way.
dropped it. They dropped it from their thing. And I was thinking, here I am promoting it all the way in New Orleans, and they dropped it. But the other thing about the second book, my now husband and I, Warren, we were actually in a situation where we have a monogamous relationship, but we actually met a younger man, and it was clear to everyone around us, and
Yeah.
eventually to us, that there's this strange sexual attraction between the three of us.
Mm.
And and I used to always think of it as someone has sprinkled a magical spell over the three of us, and all of us have no idea about how to deal with this. Now, I'll just tell you honestly, we're still friends with this person, and to this day,
Yeah.
we've never had sex together. But I guess I wrote Drama Queens and Adult Themes because I wanted to finally have that sexual moment and
Mm.
work out the morals around it. And even as a reviewer said when they uh, wrote about this book, they said, "Oh, I was expecting it to be an erotic novel, but it's not. It's actually an exploration of what fidelity is and what temptation is and what." So as you can see, I do take a lot from my own personal life because, as
Oh.
I said, I see my writing as my therapy in a way.
Oh wow. That's quite fun to know, really. Thank you for that, short explanation and a snippet into the making of that. Sounds quite amazing, really. Thank you. And also, Kelvin, your book, The Midnight Man, blends fantasy with emotion so powerfully and so captivatingly. Lovely cover you've got, even. Now, I wanted to
Oh,
ask you, what is the inspiration for that story? And what are the themes and subject lines that this story explores as well?
sure. The inspiration was just listening to one of my favorite all-time songs, Kate Bush's "Man with the
Oh,
Child in His Eyes." You know this, like, she's got this man that floats above her at night and comes and visits her, and you never know if it's a romance or if it or what the story is.
mm,
And and for The Midnight Man, because I don't generally write romance, the
yeah,
idea came about as what if someone has a dream lover that only, visits them at night in their dreams, thus Kate Bush, Man with a Child in His Eyes. But of course, it's a Kevin Klehr novel. It can't be just about a romance. So
yeah.
so I wanted to explore because I was I think I would have been in my mid 50s when I was writing it, and I
Oh,
wanted to explore aging and this belief I have that every few years we have to give up the person we are and discover who we are now in,
Wow.
whatever part of our age is.
Oh, wow.
So I wanted to explore aging. And I could do that by giving Stan, the main character who's almost turning 50, a midlife
Mm.
crisis.
Oh, wow.
But I also wanted to explore the disintegration of a relationship, which sounds like very dark themes. But
Mm. Yeah.
basically, the
Yeah.
story is about Stan, who's almost 50. He's in a failed relationship. He has an overbearing mother. He hates his job. And then meets Matt Asher, a
Mm.
21-year-old, in his dreams. But every time he meets Asher, he is 5 years younger. So the
Wow.
first meeting, he's 49. The next
Oh,
meeting, he's 44, and so on and so on. So while he's giving Asher advice on life,
yeah.
he's reflecting on his own life and where he is now, and thus finding strength through his dreams
Mm.
by reflecting on his life that
Mm.
makes changes in his waking life.
Oh, wow. That's a lovely one, really. I love your take on that. The subject lines and the characterization, too. Sounds to be quite fun and quite amazing. I would love to go back later on in the case of the interview to your characterization. But now let's diversify a little bit and talk about readers' feedbacks. Because one of the things that surprised me most as a writer, even myself, is to sit back sometimes and listen to readers' feedbacks. And for someone who has written multiple novels like yourself, you may want to agree with me that one of the things that makes literature to be quite complex is the fact that it can be interpreted in different ways by different people, by different readers, based on their opinions. And sometimes the readers might get a message intended by the author. Sometimes they might be close to getting the message. Sometimes they might be far away from getting the message, say maybe some kilometers or several miles away from getting the message. And at times, too, they might hilariously misunderstand the book and interpret it upside down. You know, as hilariously
Yeah,
fun as they sound, I would like to ask you, how do you feel when readers interpret your works slightly differently, or even differently, or entirely differently from what you intended it to be as an author? How does that make you feel as a storyteller?
it's interesting because I really am fascinated with my reviews, and
Oh,
I often get a lot of good feedback, but but sometimes people will be honest about maybe certain issues, and I listen because I think if you're going to develop yourself as a writer,
yeah,
you got to listen to critique. But then
absolutely.
sometimes there's stuff that you go, how did you get that? Like, for example, I've only written two actual romances, and they
Oh,
are Nate and the New Yorker and Nate's Last Tango. They're available as ebooks separately or in this one
mm,
um, edition. Also, all these books are out through Night Star Press,
oh wow.
and because when I wrote it, my reflections on it was, you know, TV shows I'd watched, like how Sex and the City explores
Yeah,
aspects of love and temptation and all that.
yeah.
And I had just finished rewatching all of Sex and the City to influence the writing of these books. But of course, I didn't do any sort of romance research because I just didn't realize it was such a big thing to get romance right.
Oh wow.
And the things that I explore in especially in Nation the New Yorker, one of the themes besides falling in love and romance is
Mm.
grief. And there's this paranormal twist. I'm giving too much away, but I just have to say this. And one reviewer questioned the sanity of the main character, and I'm thinking it's fiction. He's not mad. And then
You
the,
know?
and then the, and what I find is that uh, readers that really are into romance, they're
Mm.
not into these books, but other people who read more widely, which is a horrible thing to say. I don't mean to be,
Yeah.
but they get it. They understand what the book's
Yeah.
about and its other themes.
Yeah.
And I have a favorite bad review.
Oh.
I have a favorite bad review about Nate in the New Yorker because it's actually written with genuine wit. And although I don't agree with anything it says, I share it with people because it's really damn funny. But one of the things that this person sort of said is that if it's either a paranormal book or it's a romance book. You don't mix the two together. And I'm thinking, I've seen many examples on bookshops of paranormal romances. What are you talking about? But
Oh, I
but
don't
she
know.
just she just monstered it. But the other thing that I've also found really weird is um, Social Media Central is the
Mm.
first of two dystopian novels, right? And
Wow.
sorry, right.
Yeah.
And Social Media Central is set in 2064. It's about a society that's addicted to social media.
Mm.
And one review really talked about the uninspired sex scenes. And I was looking at it going, what sex scenes? There's no sex scenes in it. I don't know what you're talking about. And then to my horror, there are other people who read her review of it and
Yeah.
then wrote, oh, thank you for telling me. I always hate it when books don't, cover sex properly. I'll avoid this one. And I'm thinking, you're
Mm.
avoiding it for something that's not even in it because there is no sex in it.
Yeah,
And it throws you. And also recently, the Midnight Man, Nine Star Press, created an audiobook version. And what was weird, there's an American reviewer that spoke about its very heavy, very blatant erotic scenes. There is one sex scene at the beginning which is not meant to titilize the reader. It's
Mm.
meant to show you how unhappy Stan is in his own relationship.
Mm.
That's the only time sex is in that book. And
Yeah.
this reviewer kept saying, "Oh, there's all these dirty sex scenes in it that all." While I enjoyed the story, it was
Mm.
just too erotic. And even the narrator wrote back and sort of said, "What is she talking about? It's
Yeah.
not a dirty book. There's no other sex scenes in it." So, so,
Mm.
so, so sometimes things like that, that's the upside down. That's where
Yeah.
you go, what book were you reading?
The questions dropping in.
Yeah.
I love your take on that, and I think it's actually very fountain, really. It's one of the things that I love so much about book conversation, about book club meeting, the stance whereby we can be in a gathering of 10 people who have chosen to read and review a book at the end of the month. Say, for instance, and the first person's review will differ slightly from the second person review and will differ a bit slightly from the third person and maybe the same with that of the fourth. And then I know we keep having different feedbacks of what we've come together and we've read. And sometimes it got me wondering, sometimes I'm like, from people's feedbacks and review, I'm like, I'm sorry, did we read the same book? Because I didn't find that there.
Yeah.
I'm
What,
not quite
what,
sure I caught that there you know and I
what,
did read it from the beginning to the end. What are you talking about? you know
one thing I'll say about that, again, with Social Media Central, because it was the first dystopian book I wrote, I
oh
was reading other classic dystopian novels at the time, which I often do. I'll read a genre if I'm writing it trying to write it for the first time.
yeah.
And back then, I was very much a person who outlined. But then I
Oh.
started second guessing, doubting myself as a science fiction writer, and started changing parts of the second half of the plot.
Mm.
What was interesting, there were three reviews of Social Media Central, and I can't remember if two of them said something like they preferred the first half of the book more than the second half of the book,
Oh
and the
wow.
other one said they preferred the second half of the book better than the first half. And I was thinking, it's interesting. Some like a couple of people were drawn to when I was heavily
Amazing.
outlined the book and
Yeah.
knew what I was doing, whereas the other one liked the freeform stuff better. So it just goes to show everyone's got different
They've
tastes,
got different
and
tastes.
and it's always interesting to see how people, you know, discover their work for yourself. And
Yeah.
that's the thing I love about what my first editor taught me about show not tell. It's about writing in a
Yeah,
way where the reader reimagines their own version of your story,
yeah,
and that's what keeps them engaged. Because if you tell
absolutely.
them too much, and then so they will create their own version of the story. It could be as sexy, as dull, as
Mm.
dramatic, as comedic as they see it.
Yeah, yeah, I love your take on that, really. Thank you so much for sharing. And I can actually go on and on and on and on with it. Thank you. Now, Kevin, I also like to ask you, how do you feel when you get mistaken for a romance author? And also, how do you balance humor with emotion in your writing, especially when your story deal with serious topic in fun and unusual world? I would like your take on
Sure,
that.
I'll answer the first question about the romance author first. It's interesting because when I did write drama queens with love scenes, um, I went to a literary festival in New Orleans, and I
Mm.
was on a romance panel. And to me, it was a romance. It's about
Yeah.
two dead friends who aren't sure if they were lovers or not while they were alive, while they're in the theatre scene.
Mm.
And I remember at one stage there was someone from one of the publishing houses who stood up from her chair and stood in the aisle and went, "Don't you, said something to me like, well, if you're not a romance writer, don't put yourself up as a romance writer." And I was thinking, but I was just put on this panel, and as far as I know, this is a romance book. That's the way, it's a fantasy book, it's a
Yeah.
romance book. It to me it was. And there was another guy on the same panel as well who just said, "I just wrote a book. I didn't think about the genre it was." So I still remember that, and even I was at another literary festival called GenreCon that is in Brisbane in Australia, and
Mm.
again I was put on a romance panel, and half the conversation I really didn't know what they were talking
Oh,
about. I
wow.
just had to, and at one stage the term reverse harem came up. I could work out while I was sitting there what reverse harem meant,
Yeah.
but you had to look it up to make sure I was right later on.
Wow.
But it does happen, and I think what I find, and it's an interesting thing about being an Australian published by an American publisher,
Yeah.
is America's more into genres and
Yeah. Yeah.
sticking to genres. You don't go into another
Absolutely.
lane.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas most of the rest of us come to writing by reading widely. I mean,
Widely.
maybe there
Yeah.
are crime writers who read a lot of crime, or there are romance writers who read a lot of romance.
Mm.
But back, 12 years ago, people who were getting into writing were reading more widely. So we didn't think about the genre, and a lot of books, written in past decades, the author didn't worry about the genre at the time.
Yeah.
So it's still something that throws me a bit when people mistake me as a romance writer, because obviously there is love in all my books. There's a love
Yeah.
story in all my books,
Wow.
but I'm there to explore other themes and other aspects of my own life. Humans use humor as a coping mechanism. And as I
Absolutely.
knew from
Yeah.
in the 80s when I was studying acting,
Mm.
all dramatic plays have humor. And
Mm.
then when you go to really good, well-written sitcoms, such as Soap in the 1970s, or The Golden Girls in the 80s and 90s, or even mid-century modern now,
Mm.
they can flip into some really good dramatic scenes and then come back to the comedy, because our whole lives are filled with comedy and
Mm.
heartache, and any stand-up comic takes what they're talking about from their own experiences, and sometimes quite dramatic experiences that make us laugh. Um, and just to give you an example,
Yeah.
there's another book I've written called Winter Masquerade. It's only an ebook and a audio book, but it's exploring a man in an abusive relationship.
Wow.
But but the way I've written it, he wakes up one day on this enchanted ocean liner where all these weird and wonderful Wonderland style characters are getting ready for the Winter Masquerade, this
Mm,
magical ball that happens on this ocean liner.
yeah.
And through it, he thinks back on his actual relationship in the living world and
Mm,
realizes it's actually not a healthy relationship.
mm,
But it's great to use like fantasy or humor because there's lots of, weird, eccentric characters in this book. Yeah,
yeah.
there's one character called Camilla who it tells this short story to the other characters, and she starts with, "It's a long story, perfect for telling while watching the sunset, but not the topic of conversation for watching the sun rise." So you
Mm,
have all this magical, mystical, fun lines that you throw in,
yeah. Absolutely.
without hitting the reader over the head with the harder themes that this book is actually about.
Oh, wow, that's a lovely one. And I do agree with you, mentioning that human uses humor as a coping mechanism. It's a lovely one as a coping mechanism. And I've read some very striking, overly emotional, sad books. And it's always shocked me the way the author will slightly use humor in some parts. I'll be like, oh my God, that's so funny. Dark humor specifically,
Oh yeah.
something is so sad and you're making a joke out of it. Some people might find it to be very annoying, even real life experiences, while some find it because I was like, "Oh, that's quite amazing. I mean, you've written a very striking novel and you're still making us to laugh. Is it an attempt to make the readers to feel a bit quite ease after, leaving us with a lot of emotional backlash, stuff of that nature? And it's always amazed me, really. I love novels of that nature. Having to have a blend of sadness and some laughing moment. It's a fun one, really. Yeah,
Yeah,
it is.
yeah. It's true. It's how we live our lives, and
Yeah,
sometimes in the darkest moments,
that's what
you
I'm
know,
saying.
humor is a lot. Look, just to give you an example, like my father passed away probably about 20 years ago now,
Mm,
and there's four of us kids, and we were rolling after the ceremony, the funeral. The four of us were rolling my dad's coffin down the aisle between the pews. But my younger sister is quite voluptuous, and the aisle wasn't like large enough for us to just go straight.
mm,
My older brother and sister were at the head, but we at the back were moving Dad around, knocking. She was knocking into the thing, and we were laughing because we just had this somber experience
mm.
of celebrating our dad. That me and my sister Simone, we were laughing, and my brother and sister were giving us the dirtiest looks from the front. But it happens. It happens. You need to let it
Oh my
loose.
goodness.
You need the release valve.
Yeah, see, I love that. I love what you said. We're giving you a dirtiest look from afar. Like, what the hell are you doing? But you stop that. Well, you're finding fun while grieving at the same time. I think it's a very lovely theme. It's a lovely thing.
Yeah,
We should sometimes get used to things of this nature. It helps us to live life quite easily and be able to navigate the challenges that comes with it. Thank you for sharing. Thank you. Now, just apart from the books we've mentioned so far, do you have any other works you've authored or say currently working on?
Look, through Nine Star Press, there's two short stories that are only
Wow.
like downloadable short stories. One's called Midnight Angel, and one's
Oh,
called Three Ghosts. They're fun comedies. I've been working on a novel called Tin Men and Scarecrows, which I hope will come out soon. I've got another project that I call the 90s Project. I actually have a great title for it, but it's
mm,
so good I don't want to share it. I don't want anyone to grab that same title
yeah.
if I say it. Um, but me and Warren have been together for 35 years now. So we met
Yeah.
in the 1990s.
Mm,
And in that time, Sydney had a lot of rave parties and big dance parties. And
mm,
that was pretty much the background to our first years together. So I
yeah.
wanted to write a book that celebrates that part of Sydney and that and that culture.
Yeah.
But the other thing I'm working on at the moment, which I hope to get finished in time, I usually take several years to write a novel. I'll work on several projects at the same time.
Yeah.
And each year I used to have something new come out, but that book had been worked on over several years. But
Mm,
I'm working on my first, what will be my first self-published project.
yeah.
And it's in collaboration with a whole bunch of other gay authors under the title Haunted Hearts. These authors did a series of romance novels last year
Mm.
based around gay characters that had to feature a ghost. This year we have to feature a wizard.
Oh,
So in collaboration with J.P. Jackson, Hal Frost, Blake Allwood, Ryan Lawrence, Shane K. Morton, Christian Baines, Glenn Quigley, Eric Roman, C.D. Rachels, and M.D. New. We're all working on these novels with a tight deadline. Mine is a comedy because I'm better at writing comedy when I've got a deadline.
wow.
It's what I'm best at. And mine's called Grayson's Magical Mishaps. And I hope to write it because I'm really trying to write it and get a chip shape for release around Halloween.
Yeah.
And it's just about a guy who basically doesn't know he's a wizard till one day he sneezes and a miniature pink elephant appears on his sofa. He has no idea
Wow.
what's going on and no idea why this elephant is there. And thus he
Mm.
learns that he's a wizard, but he doesn't know how to control his wizard
Oh,
powers yet. So every time he sneezes, something
wow.
crazy stupid happens that he has to try and deal with. So yeah, but as I said, there's lots of books out through Nine Star Press that I've written. There's a few short stories in
Wow.
some other anthologies. Um, but yeah, there's quite a few, and I've got quite a few around me.
Wow.
Um, yeah,
Yeah, sounds like you've got a lot ongoing, really. That's a lot,
yeah.
and it's quite commendable. And I hope you
You
find
can
some
tell I'm
time to
enjoying
finish
writing.
the lovely one. That's a great one. Well done. Yeah, and I wanted to ask you, just in case of viewers who are watching this interview, I would love to get a copy of any of your books. On what platforms are they available on for purchase?
Pretty much everything. The good thing about Nine Star Press, they're uh, pretty much any online bookshop you want.
Yeah.
In your, in Australia, our local ones like Booktopia have them, Barnes and Noble, Amazon. They're wide reaching. They're not just on Amazon. So
Mm.
or you just go into your local bookstore and ask for one, and they'll get it in.
That's amazing. And I left a link in the description part of this interview where interested viewers can get a copy of Kevin Klehr books directly on Amazon and Barnes& and Nobles on his website and also on other platforms. I also left a link to his social media pages for possible followings. So thank you so much, Kelvin, for accepting the invitation to be featured on P English Literature. And also this conversation is more than awesome, so animated, lively, lovely. Having this beautiful conversation with you around your titles. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Peter. I've really enjoyed talking to you, and I'll just say, if you haven't read Peter's poetry, have a read. One I loved, as I told Peter before we started recording this, I killed my tongue. I was really moved by that poem. So make
Wow.
sure you check out Peter's poetry.
Thank you. That makes me blush. Thank you so much, Kelvin.